Wunjeka, everyone. Welcome to our panel. This is about foundational skills. I will be slowly eliminating people from this stage in an orderly fashion. It should take about an hour. If you have questions, we have a Slido. This is a system that allows us to crowdsource questions. If we run out of questions, I have a cube down here. I'm not afraid to throw it. As way of introductions, I will start. Hello, my name is Katie. I am currently a board member of the Django Software Foundation, and I'm a co-chair of DevOps Days Global, which is a very interesting thing that people in this room may not be interested in, but come talk to me afterwards. And by way of introducing our other panelists, Christopher, whomst you?
Hi, my name is Christopher Neugebauer. I'm the one of two vice chairs of the Python Software Foundation, and I'm on the steering committee of PyCon Australia. In the past, I've been involved in Linux Australia, the computing society at my university, and I was also a very long time ago now co-chair of PyCon Australia.
Amazing. Next up, we have Deb.
Hi, Deb Nicholson, the Executive Director of the Python Software Foundation. Long ago, I was a co-organizer of the Boston Python Meetup. I serve on the board of the Sprightly Institute. Yeah, I have a library card.
Russell.
Hi, Russell Keith McGee. I am a former president of the Django Software Foundation and currently founder of the Beware project. I am on the industry advisory board for the computer science department at Curtin University in Perth. I'm treasurer of PyCon Australia this year on the Python steering committee, and yes, former team member of the Django project itself.
Danny, you've also got a very large slide.
Hello, yeah. I founded the New Zealand Python user group in 2009 together with 15 other people. And today I'm the treasurer of what is now called Python New Zealand and the chairperson of the Kiwi PyCon organizing subcommittee of Linux Australia.
Amazing. And then Clinton, I've even got a slide for you.
Hello, my name's Clinton. I'm a software engineer. I have been involved with Linux Australia, PyCon AU, several user groups. At the moment, I'm on a technical committee for synchrotron Blue Sky projects, shepherding a whole bunch of software that synchrotrons around the world use. And I come from a research background. I'm not in the commercial field, so I might have a different point of view on different things.
We love different points of view on this panel. So I will be keeping up the Slido link. Please ask questions. You do not want to be hit in the head with a cube. I can actually throw very far. To get us started, I would love to hear a quick summary of each of our panelists' origin story. What were the series of events that got you into your first foundation position? And I'll start with Clinton.
Because I've got the mic?
Yeah.
So I went to uni in Brisbane. I did IT. I guess a lot of it was not wanting to deal with people, so dealing with computers, and naturally fell into that. At the University of Queensland, we had a fairly, for the time, a fairly large Linux user group, and that's how I got involved in Humbug, the Home Unix Machine Brisbane Users Group. And then eventually took on some executive roles in that. I think pretty much everything over a period of time. And from there, we went on as part of Humbug to organise Linux Conf AU in Brisbane a few times, and from there into Linux Australia and doing some things for Linux Australia.
Cool. Who wants to go next?
Okay, I guess my origin story for foundation stuff is a case of right place, right time, or wrong place, wrong time. I was a major contributor to Django at the point at which the Django Software Foundation existed, but as purely as a legal entity, and they were looking for someone to take over a more active role to make the foundation actually do something more useful and fill the roles that the people who were nominally the chairs weren't comfortable or didn't have the energy or enthusiasm to actually to move forward. So I got sort of asked to stand in. Are you interested? What would you do if you had the chair? And then kind of took it from there.
All right.
So for me, I went to my first tech conference between my first and second years of uni, and that was Linux Conf EU in 2008 in Melbourne. I found that a lot more interesting than uni was the previous year, and I wanted to bring some of that feeling to my fellow students, and so started running a Tech Talk series for the Computing Society at the University of Tasmania. And one thing led to another, and by the end of that year I was on the committee of that, and very quickly after that president, because when you do things people promote you, which is very strange. Subsequently, I was at another Linux Conf EU. I didn't run away when a couple of people decided they wanted to found PyCon Australia, and I ended up running the third one of those.
Well, there's your problem.
And yes. So the problem is not stepping back quickly enough. But
There's questions about that later. Danny or Debbie?
Deb.
Just Deb. Yeah, so I went to school for painting and sculpting, which leads to no jobs. So I did that job where you work at a nonprofit and try to get money for the environment. And then I found out that they didn't have an office manager. Then I was the office manager. And then I went to be the office manager somewhere else at another nonprofit that worked on like peace and social justice and stuff, including civil liberties. So I started asking a lot of questions about like who is in control of how we interact with governmental systems and how we get information and who's in charge of where we have conversations about this stuff. And then there was a job opening at the Free Software Foundation. And they normally didn't get people applying for that job that knew anything about running nonprofits. So I asked them a lot of questions about the budget and all those kinds of things, and they gave me a job. And then again, like Chris, I am bad at stepping back. So they kept promoting me until they ran out of money for headcount, and they laid me off. And then I went and got like 6 more jobs in open source, and eventually the job opened up at the PSF, and I had done every other job, so I applied for this one.
Yahtzee. And Danny?
Yeah, so after starting with Python at the end of the last millennium, I came to New Zealand and I saw C# and Java jobs, and I was very disappointed with that, and I found some like-minded people who were also enjoying Python at a time where there were no Python jobs in New Zealand. But I had been earning my daily bread with that for a while, and so we said, let's do this. And you start off with like mailing list and something like that, and then we said, let's do this properly, and we'll have a conference. 2009 was our first one. I think I mentioned that today before, and that was in Christchurch. And when you run a big conference, you usually need some sponsors, and if you want sponsors, you usually don't give them your private bank account and say, she'll be right. So with an organization, with its own entity, you also create positions which don't have names on them. They have roles that can be filled by someone else. So we're trying to build something that maybe can live longer than each of us or each of our enthusiasms. And that was my trapdoor story, because it's still continuing to this day. The first 9 years I was president, and then I just haven't let go. I tried to several times. Is this like an anonymous session here? But I keep getting back to it. And yeah, for various reasons, lots of different reasons. I think in 2019 I said this is my last conference that I'm going to organize. And here we are. So yeah.
There will be questions about that kind of stuff later. I realised I could be answering some of these questions. First open source conference I ever spoke at, there was an AGM for a group called the Open Source Developers Club that they wanted to disband, and they wanted a treasurer. So my first position was getting rid of a foundation. Does that mean that I'm the only person that's made it out? If you saw the length of the slide of things that I still do, you'll know that's not true, Thomas. Speaking of questions, thank you people for submitting things. I'm going to be picking from far too many questions now, so...
I just want to point out how positive and outgoing and forward-thinking all of the introductions are. Like, we all really love the work that we do. It just doesn't come across a lot of the time.
Speaking of the love for the work that you do, what is one thing you wish your community knew about your foundation that isn't common knowledge? And which, with all these questions, like, we have so many places, so if you want to prefix it with which particular one you're talking about, or specifically not one, that's also fine. So what is one thing that isn't common knowledge that you wish people knew about?
For me, the previous organisation I've worked for, Linux Australia, I would dearly love to explain how much time some of the executive put into running things behind the scenes. Like, when stuff hits the fan, there are people who are taking time off work and spending days trying to fix a problem behind the scene and just putting their entire life on hold for days to fix things. A lot of the time, these are things that you don't really want to talk about in public, that you can't really talk about in public, but it is, at times, can be an enormous time sink, and that's the thing that I want people to realise at times.
Kind of tagging on that, like, we only have 13 people at the PSF, so we have a lot of interest from the internet because, as I said, we have like 8 million plus Python users, and sometimes we get things that have like, I don't know if you have this idea of sort of Karen energy, like, I was trying to download Python, and there is nobody at wherever your help desk is that I cannot find to help me with that. And that could be a man's voice. I'm just not good at doing male voices. I don't want that to be a gendered part of the conversation. But it's there are so many things in Python that happen because volunteers step up and do it. And the growth of Python has been exponential over the last few years. So it's kind of like I was like, hey, can you hold this 5-pound thing? And then like, as a volunteer, and then we're like, cool, so that's yours forever? You're saying it's 50 pounds now? Okay, let me know when it gets to be 100. And then maybe we'll see if we can find an intern or something for you. And so we have a lot of things like that in Python where I come and I find people in the community and I'm like, how long have you been holding the 50-pound bag for that task? So yeah, I kind of wish that was more common knowledge.
Yeah, I see. I hope this is going to be very therapeutic for all of us here on stage. and maybe funny for you. But I think I'm very much so would like to say that apart from time ticking on, nothing happens by itself, really. And the good things need to be done by someone. And so, yeah.
Yeah,
I was
going
to identify yourself with what you want, and then get into those shoes from the other side sometimes, you know?
Yeah, I was going to play off both of those basically, that there is a big difference between malice and oversight, and malice and just straight up not knowing that this was a thing that was a problem. In many of our cases, it is a volunteer role, it is a volunteer position. We are spending a lot of personal time to do this. And when we haven't set up a program to whatever pet issue someone might have, which is an important and valid issue that needs to be addressed, it's because it just literally hasn't come onto our radar. But you know what would be great? If someone else could step up to volunteer to actually make that happen. You have the title of President of the DSF, or whatever role it happens to be. All the rat power really gives you is to say, okay, yes, absolutely, I can give you the hat that is the responsibility for that, but I need to know that you're interested in that and available for that and want to have that responsibility if only you tell us.
Yeah, I think that sort of formally organised things like foundations or charities or associations, people tend to notice when sort of formally organised things stop doing what they say that they're going to do. You know, if you say that you're going to have a meeting every year and talk about things and you don't do that, people notice that. So like on that note, like we at the Python Software Foundation, we can enable projects and groups of people and conferences through money, through legal resources, through providing accounting services for projects. But often, like, if you don't need those things, you don't necessarily need to work through us or other foundations to do the things that you want to do. And it's a lot easier to step back when you don't have formal expectations that you've set with other people about that. And it's I find it I find it a lot easier to do random things if I don't have that formal set of expectations.
Okay.
Not to say that you can't or that everything fits into that bucket.
Okay, so there's a couple of questions that have come in here specifically for people or for organisations. So there's one here specifically for the PSF. How does the PSF actually make money to run the organisation and support development?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would love to joke and say, you tell me, but mostly it's corporate donations right now. We are working on increasing the individual donation pool, and we have just started in the last 2 years dipping our toe in for more grants that are not specifically from tech companies, including government grants, so that may be coming. But largely, we have created, as I hear in our funding conversations, a value proposition that is undeniable. Basically, like, if PyPI stops running, our company will be very sad. And I'm like, how sad? And then they write us a check, and we have conversations like that all year round.
And from a historical perspective, the PSF originally sort of founded PyCon US as the vehicle for receiving a lot of money and putting some of that into running a conference and hopefully taking some off the top and putting that into maintaining an organization that can support everything else. And sometimes things like 2020 happen when suddenly there's no longer a conference to receive all of that money. And over the last few years, there's been a real effort to diversify what the foundation exchanges for that sponsorship. And so now we're in a position where the foundation can go, hey, do you want to actually sponsor PyPI? Because that's what you're actually paying for. And if that's the thing you depend upon, well, why don't you get that prestige? And it's a thing that's definitely improved the sustainability of the foundation, but long way to go there.
Not specifically about the PSF, although there possibly is some overlap. In the context of the DSF is instituted under a very specific legal provision in the US, and it cannot fund Django development. It is not, because software development is not viewed by the IRS as a charitable activity. So it is there to sustain a community. As a result of sustaining the community, there is a couple of fellows, people who hold the role of DSF fellow, whose role is not to develop Python, but to ensure that community contributions are being managed correctly. So the foundations, and it is definitely true to the PSF as well, most of the actual thing you consider to be software development is not being done by the foundation. The foundation holds the IP, it holds the trademark, it does the legal stuff that needs to exist, but the software is being developed by the community. The foundation may do some things that occasionally tangentially look like software development, but on paper strictly probably aren't. And it's worth keeping that distinction in mind when you are talking about foundations.
So coming on from that a little bit, the question here is, did your foundation start with a firm culture in mind, or has the culture faced evolution over time, and how did that happen? It sounds like, especially for the DSF, that's Django Software Foundation, it had to do it for legal reasons. But for the other panelists, for your organizations, was there like a good starter culture, or did it kind of just bubble over time? I think I'm thinking of yogurt, not humans. Or beer.
We definitely had yogurt at the beginning.
I think it's really fair to say in the Linux Australia example. So I was volunteered to help run the first Linux Conf AU outside of Sydney, and so I saw a lot of the angst that the organisation had really early on about that, and I think it's really, really plain to see that a lot of the early Linux Conf AUs was around Linux being cool, being a lot of money in Linux, being a lot of VC funding, and it being, for many, many people, being a way to turn a quick buck and to get on the to get in that shadow of Linux being an up-and-coming thing, get on the hype train and build a business around that. Over time, that's become much more around open source. It's become much more around communities, much more around enabling different communities to learn and grow in the ways that they want to grow. So at least for Linux Australia, it's fundamentally changed from like very much a tech bro thing right at the start to a much more open, community-led, community-driven approach.
I think when it comes to organizational culture for us, there's always a struggle between defining and defending on one hand, and on the other hand, being innovative and open and changing things completely if necessary. So you start off and it's all new, of course, but then it's also time intensive and complicated, lots of work, and so you want to streamline and simplify, make it easy for others to enter and help, and that in turn makes things a little bit more rigid. Like, this is how we do things. For a reason, sure, but why not do it different ways? So just from a culture perspective, the struggle is always that you don't want to get into a cycle of having this learning curve again and again and again. Reinventing has a lot of advantages, and improving what is time-honored also does. So I think there's always that balance and that struggle with culture.
Do you have something, Deb?
So I wasn't here at the beginning of Python. I was probably still working on raising the minimum wage, but well, a little bit. It could still be more. But what I have noticed is, like something that you said, is that reinventing is hard. It's this constant process of enforcing what is happening now, and kind of trying to see a little into the future on what you want to have your community become. It's way easier to start from scratch and be like, hey, we're going to start with diverse leadership at the front, make it really welcoming. So like when I started Siegel, when I co-started Media Goblin and joined the founding board of Sprightly, it was like, hey, this is going to be like a beautiful, diverse rainbow of a project with like ethics at the core. If you are not interested in that and you only read 2 sentences on our website, you're not going to stay. Like that's way easier than dealing with the momentum of a long-term project and trying to like constantly bend that towards what you want to see for the future of the project.
I think about the organizations that I've been involved in, and they can set out with goals about what the culture they want to have is, but if they say like, we want to be an organization for the entire Python community, at the start of an organization, when you don't have the entire Python community with you, or the entire whatever community you're trying to serve, you don't actually know what that community looks like because they're not there with you. And it takes a lot of intention to figure out how to bring on more of that community and bring more people in. And I remember actually in both of the sort of communities that I've been involved in, the Australian open source community and Python, around like 2010 through 2015, like there was a real reckoning amongst our communities about we're entirely male dominated and are not bringing people in, bringing other people in, bringing women in, bringing more gender diverse people in to our communities, and figuring out how to bring those different viewpoints and different sorts of people in. And it takes a lot of listening, and that's something that I don't think our organizations were prepared for, or our communities were prepared for early, but generally speaking, I think we've done a good job of changing, but it required intentional work at a pivotal time to allow that to happen.
And I completely agreed. And in many cases, the reason a foundation is founded is because it is a legal necessity, not a community necessity. Like Django as a software project doesn't need a foundation strictly. Like, it could be organised any number of ways. But there has to be a company that owns the IP that can issue a lawsuit to say, no, you can't call this project Django whatever. And so, therefore, a legal institution exists, which means it then has a bank account, which means it then needs to have annual elections for a president, blah, 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 all the stuff that goes along with that. And if the foundation then takes responsibility for the community, that is, a good thing and a useful thing, but the role, the fact that it existed originally as a legal necessity requires a change of culture and requires a change of understanding of what the scope of this organisation is, and communicating that amongst the community, who are then subject to the bylaws and whatnot of the community this foundation now exists. So, yeah, it's complicated.
All right. So here's something to lighten things up a little bit. Tell us about the time that you tried something that succeeded so wildly that you're kind of shocked. Alternatively, what's the time that you tried something and it backfired so spectacularly that you were kind of shocked? This is more about, like, instead of, as part of your role, keeping things going, what was the time when you were like, how about we go this way? And tell us whether it exploded in confetti or flame.
I can give you an explosion.
Yes. No.
So, Django was a project for a web framework. Want to guess the hardest part of trying to maintain Django project? The website. Because large-scale web design is hard, and trying to redesign the website for a project is really, really difficult, and particularly when it is design-focused, and there are a lot of people with very strong ideas about what design looks like. I made the somewhat naive suggestion that we should have a design competition for the design of the Django website, and was then told very firmly by designers that no, that's not how we do things, because we don't comp large amounts of work for free when we don't know that this is going to be appreciated at the other end. So yes, lesson learned, move on.
I'll do a minor confetti one. We thought, at the beginning of Media Goblin, we thought, maybe we could crowdfund this. And then as we started, it was like one of those like high volume exchange between myself and the other founder, Christine, where it was like, and then this, and then this, and then we'll draw little goblins, and then we'll do this, and then like, oh, we'll have like stretch goals, and it'll be great. So we went super weird on our fundraising for Media Goblin, and it worked.
Oh.
So for me, the thing that I think about is when I was running the Tech Talk series for the University Computing Society, doing a thing that I wasn't sure there was demand for, and then discovering over sort of what turned into a runaway success over the first year we did it, realizing that I had this thing that I couldn't really give away, and there was an expectation for me to run it, which ended up taking up a lot of my free time over the over the following 3 years. So, like things that you experiment with, if you don't have a plan for how your community takes them on, often you can get stuck with them.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of something. Doesn't make me very emotional. I have a story though, don't worry, it'll be short. I'm not known to get very emotional or aggressive about things or involved in we didn't do large things where I'd expected. See, disappointment comes from expectation, either way. And I think they've all been well dosed. We've had one story, which I'm not going to tell you about this year and last year, about our charity and why we have a Phoenix sponsor, Phoenix in the extreme form, and why we're still here. But on the positive side, I remember not doing any meetups in Wellington because of COVID-19. And in Auckland, in other places, it did take quite some time. People got complacent, got used to participating from online, remotely, and they didn't get into it much. And I was really positively surprised how hungry everyone in Wellington was to get back into real person meetings, which we always were about, not mailing lists of meetings in person. And we went from 0 to 100 really. And we're back to 30, 40 people once a month here in Wellington. So if you didn't know about that, go to meetup.com, look for Python in your area.
Very smooth. Well done. I guess two things from Linux Australia. Something that we perennially fail to do is set reasonable expectations for conference organisers. I'm speaking particularly about Linux Conf AU and everything open here, where at the start of the organising round for next year's conference or the following year's conference, we would always reach out and say, we need a venue, we probably need some projectors, we need a place for people to stay. If you get those three things, and we need speakers. If you get those 3-4 basic things covered and sorted, you've got a conference. Please focus on those things. Don't come to us with visions of penguin ice sculptures with alcohol pouring down them. We failed repeatedly, year after year after year. You'd have a successful Linux Conf AU, and somebody would attend, and they'd get all excited about it. And this is the first or second conference that they've ever attended, and so they wanted to run their own conference in their own home city next year or the year after or whatever. And every time, everyone just wanted to do a bigger and better conference. We're a volunteer-run conference. We don't want to burn people out. We want to keep it cheap and cheerful. And there's a fair bit of the Brisbane boy and me keeping things cheap and cheerful, because that's pretty much how we do things. But it means that Linux Australia's failure to set organising levels appropriate and expectations for the conference organisers means that we have these spectacular conferences, but it means that people overburden themselves, burn out and collapse. So we have this enormous fun time at the start of the year, and then nobody wants to go near it for another 6-9 months. So our failure to set expectations there was a big problem. And I guess another issue that we had, particularly with Linux Conf AU, was the process of our paper review team. We did not have an appropriate handover, changeover, rollover scheme where we could get new people into the review process and shuffle people around and keep it fresh. And instead of biting that piecemeal and solving that properly, it blew up into a big mess, and it took a couple of years to fix it. There were a lot of bridges burnt, a lot of people hurt by that. So that is, we have a yearly little blow up, and that for me was like a cataclysmic blow up. There are people who do not talk to each other anymore over that particular thing. So that is a real sore point.
So speaking of succession planning, I have a question here for Ross, PyCon AU's Forever Treasurer trademark. How do you approach succession planning for the roles that are essential but don't have a lot of people lining up to help with them?
If anyone has any ideas, please let me know. Succession planning is absolutely hard. I guess the seed of it is finding someone who's willing to take it over, and even that I don't know that I have a good answer for. You had made the mistake of putting your hand up, so I'm taking any ideas here.
So Russ is amazing. The idea that there is a second Russ out there that isn't doing 400 things already, waiting to step into your shoes, is science fiction. What you need to be... I do too, and I want 7 of me, and one of them will just cook. But in the food sense, not the, anyway. That's for someone else to say. You can't say that about yours. It's like calling yourself a thought leader. You can't do it. But what you should be looking for is like thinking about maybe 5 categories for your work and getting someone to come in on each of those 5 categories, because you're not going to find someone as accomplished as yourself to take on every single thing that you're doing.
I agree, and this is I guess specifically, I am the treasurer of PyCon Australia. That in itself is a very well constrained role and doesn't require that many skills. Like it requires skills, but it's a very narrow focus. But most of the people in this room are software engineers, not accountants. And so finding someone who is willing to be an accountant for volunteer purposes is the thing that is difficult. And there are people who are willing to do it. Please, if you want to do it, come and talk to me.
So the second, I'll make that quick. The second piece of that is sometimes you should pay someone to do something. Like filing taxes should not be done by people who are doing it under social duress badly.
And that's definitely the big difference I've noticed from the two boards that I've been on in my professional life. I really value the PSF's accounting team. Yeah.
Phyllis.
From PyCon AU's perspective, on the roles of leadership that aren't the treasurer's role, we've made a sort of deliberate effort to seek out leadership 2 to 4 years in advance in the hope that we find someone, and generally speaking we did, and up until the pandemic stopped people meeting in person. But for the 10 years before that, identifying people who would be suitable for leadership, bringing them on and exposing them to what the organization looks like before they have to take on the entire thing, so they can decide whether or not it's a thing they'd actually be good at. And comparing PyCon AU to how LinuxConf AU has run, because I've run both of them in my time, the actual involving future leaders in the organization has been a thing that's worked really well for our succession planning. And I think for the most part that's led to a fairly healthy conference. Obviously we have difficulty finding alternate treasurers, but alas.
I think that's what I've spent the most thinking about and not enough doing. And in the last couple of years in particular, I've started focusing on this, is that it shouldn't feel like we have to find someone dumb enough to do this. And on the other hand, there's a lot of enthusiastic people who have energy. There's two things. One is they're not quite sure what it entails. And don't sell it with 1 hour per month we meet and it's all cool. There is a bit more. And the other thing is that it should be so easy that you don't have to subscribe for 5 or 10 years to do it, right? And if that requires the job to be even more narrow in its definition, then so be it. And if there are some policies around things and checklists to just go through and make it really simple, and like you say, outsourcing, like we have Xero now instead of a spreadsheet. How about that? For example, it costs some money. They're all supporting charities, these software as a service providers. But I think, nobody, if you think, oh yeah, I want to help with the Python community, nobody's enthusiastic about the red tape of keeping committee minutes and organizing an annual general meeting and reporting to charity services once a year. No one got excited about that, but that needs to be done as well. So somehow, as a team effort, make that as streamlined and as simple as possible so we can focus on what we're actually excited about.
And extension of that, both the foundations need to be better at making it easier to get people to volunteer that time, but also from the perspective of a broader audience of, I'd like to get involved with a foundation. There's janitorial work that needs to get done. No, it's not glamorous, but it's work that needs to get done if you want this community as a whole to succeed. And so if you're enthused and want to get involved, there is almost certainly a janitorial task that someone on a foundation would like you to do if only they knew you were there and available.
I would even add to that, if you hear about a janitorial task and you're like, I wonder if I could do that with a friend. The answer is so yes, your roommate, partner, whatever. Yeah, like there's no reason it can't be two.
Yeah. I would love to shout out our wonderful friends who do accounting stuff at the Django Software Foundation, and also conference ops from the DevOps Day side. You are very underthanked. Catherine Holmes, hope you see this. Following on with the volunteer stuff, what's the best thing you didn't know you needed until a volunteer came and started doing it for you? Repeating the question, what is the best thing that you didn't know you needed until a volunteer came and started doing it for you? For me, social media posting. Just someone who just is the conversations that are happening while you're organizing an event, and somebody going, oh yes, our CFP is open for 2 weeks, our CFP is open for 1 week, our CFP closes, whatever. It's just such a load off your head when you're trying to disseminate information to not just your core group of organizers, but also everyone who you want to attend your event. Also having to deal with so many social media platforms. I don't know what Twitter's called this week. Thank you to the young'uns who are fixing that for me.
This is another example from Media Goblin. We started building, Media Goblin is and was a decentralized media hosting platform. And we had someone come and say, like, do you mind if I do some translation of the documentation? And we're like, yes. Then they started pulling in other translators for like 7 or 10 other languages and organizing them to translate all our docs. And that was amazing. It was a huge boost for the this coding community to be able to tell people how to install Media Goblin in like 12 different languages.
So Java, Python.
Arabic, Italian, Portuguese, Spanish, French, and I think Korean.
Oh, that's cool. Sorry,
So
Chris.
one of my fellow organizers on the North Bay Python conference is Andrew Godwin. He is a private pilot in his spare time and cares a lot about having checklists of things. And this was not a thing that I think he went out of his way to do, but like in our second year when he started taking on putting the network together, realized that our entire sort of operational load in and load out of the conference was a complete mess. And so he spent the lead up to our second conference documenting and making checklists for everything for how we set up and loaded our event. And the following year, everything was repeatable. And the second year we ran in our current venue, everything was repeatable from the first year because it was all checklisted. So I did not expect that, but like having actual operational expertise in how to do a thing, as opposed to just the vision, which apparently is all I brought to that thing. It's not enough.
Do you have their contact details? This is a great contribution. You don't want to share, okay? Okay. Well, I think as an organization, you want to provide a space for all sorts of volunteer activities that don't have to be seeded or prompted from the top or from the mandated or even paid for or something like that. And I think Pi Noon is a good example. That's Grant and Ben, and there is a poster in the breakout room. That wasn't asked for, that wasn't thought about. That came from left field, from someone who said, hey, this is our idea, we're just going to run with it, and you want to put this under your umbrella, and then we can use the same communication platform, and members, people can come to this group, and we can bring people to your organization, and it all fits. It's all about Python. We don't have to run on multiple tracks or platforms. And yeah, I like that because it was a nice surprise. It's like a nice surprise. Yeah, more of that.
The thing that I saw get done really well, 2011 Brisbane floods, I think. The thing that I saw done really well that year was a volunteer organiser. So this is someone whose sole job was, and I really mean sole job, not 400 tasks, as well as looking after the on-the-ground volunteers helping run the conference. Making sure that they had the training for what they had to do, so that they understood the schedule, they understood how much time they needed to give the speakers for questions, they understood all of the AV equipment and how they were going to interact with the AV systems, making sure that the volunteers were not, you know, I've seen things. I've seen volunteers get stuck out at residential colleges all day helping people lug their luggage. Like, they've just flown in and volunteers have been there all day lugging luggage up flights of stairs because the lifts are out. They've had no food. They've got a couple of dollars for like a Coke vending machine and that's it. And like, I've arrived and I've like, you look a bit tired, and it's like I've ended up helping them do that job because there's no one looking out for them. So having a volunteer organiser looking after the people on the ground, so many of these volunteer organisers, it's their first time doing this thing. We're bringing them into the community. We need to look after them, and we need to look after them properly and appropriately. We need to give them the training, but we also need to give them the power to say no. You'll always have people who ask inappropriate things. Can you help pick my luggage up? It's a very inappropriate thing to ask. There's always things during a conference where the speaker's going to ask someone to run around and do something. You have to be able to train your volunteers up with the power and the ability to say no to that. So if there's a conference that I'm around and I see that they don't have a volunteer organiser, someone whose explicit job is to look after the volunteers, I put my hand up to do that.
So we've got about 13 minutes left, so I've got about 2 big discussion points that I want to do. This one's going to be the bit of a downer and we'll end on a bit of a happier one. What do the days after a major event look like for you and your org? How do you rest, recuperate? How do you and your team rest, recover and channel energy to the next one? Now, I read this originally as a conference event, but now I'm reading it as a capital E event.
At the PSF, the week after PyCon US, staff is encouraged to take the entire week off with pay. I usually take the week after because somebody has to answer the questions that come in during that week. But I definitely do take the week after.
Yeah, I guess decompression is really the big deal. Is that there are crunch moments where you are working the 20, 24-hour days to get something done, but you can't do that pace continuously, and then you need to stop and step back for a bit, and that's basically all you really can do. Like, if you don't have infinite resources going in, you are going to crunch, and a little bit of crunch you can survive, but then you need to step back. And looking at it from the big E event, when the mailing list thread that discusses the intensely political topic blows up, okay, absolutely, let's put that fire out, and then let's step back and not look at that for a little bit, just to give yourself the mental headspace so that you don't hate everybody. Speaking as someone who has had a mental health crisis in my life, you do get to a point where everything in the world seems bad, and you need to realise that no, that is, at least to some extent, the circumstances of right now, and if you don't take the break will find you. So,
as coming from the volunteer side of the same organisation as Deb, as a volunteer, figuring out what a natural endpoint or breaking point for a task is so important. If you're doing a volunteer role and you can't see where you can take a break, it's probably not a good idea to take it on until you figure that out. That's one thing. But for running a conference, for me, it's the day after the venue is signed for the next year. So it's run the conference, get the contract signed, and then do nothing for a few months on that so that I can come back and run it again the next year. For the big capital E event that we've had in the Python community that I've been spending far too much time on is bylaws changes. And for that, I identified, okay, we're going to get this thing sorted out. And then I went camping the day after I was able to get it merged to GitHub, and I was completely off grid for 4 days. Being able to go, okay, here is the end point where I will have achieved what I need to have achieved, and being able to go, okay, I can check out, can somebody else step up for me or take care of those things? If there's no obvious point where I can get out of it, it's like, that's a death spiral, and you don't want to be in that as a volunteer, because that's when you do end up having personal impacts taking you out of the community, or you're taking you out of things beyond.
Regarding a capital E event, I would say ask me in a couple of months, but in this
You have one planned?
this particular conference, I've got more plans. Sorry,
I want to
actually,
know how you do that.
Actually, not in a couple of months. I won't be here. I'll be busy.
What did I say, Danny?
Wait,
Okay.
I was
go on.
wanting to talk about the conference event, how you do that, because as a German, I think if you plan meticulously and execute with discipline, there won't be many surprises. And that exhaustion you feel and that collapse you have, today is Saturday, Sunday evening maybe, that can all be prepared. So we have, for example, a post-conference website sitting ready to do the switch on Monday, because otherwise it'll be like so many conferences where it says, tomorrow is the big day, and then you check and it was 3 months ago because they've just deflated so much, they just left that
Add
website
me
as
next
it is.
time. Bloody hell. No, I was going to have a quip in here about your conference events. There's definitely the things on the Monday that need to be done, but most people should be checking out and then coming back in to work out after consideration if they want to do it again. But when it's a capital E event that you don't know about ahead of time, there is definitely, for those people that have a continued position, you need to be comfortable in your foundation and the people you work with to say, I am taking a week, I will be back then. The I will be back is important, but making sure you can say, I am now out for a little bit. Like having some sort of out of office thing, but coming back is a thing, even if it's just to say, I'm coming back now, but I'm going to work out how I can get someone else to do this now. There's definitely the emotional spike at conference events where people are like, oh, I want to come next year, I want to do the thing that sort of dissipates. So knowing that you have the energy to say, okay, I'll put an alarm on that for a week and I'll come back, see who else is interested again. That is so important for I think, just making sure that we keep that enthusiasm rocketing through to the next bit.
I think, what works for different people is different things. So I think the only thing that we sort of share up here is that when you're in a foundation, you're not on your own. Always reach out and communicate with other people in your group. If you are feeling that a particular event is getting too much and you can't deal with it on your own, or you're struggling with the workload because there's extra things in your life, there's always other people in your group to talk to and can take some of the load. So that's all I'd like to say on that.
I wanted to add, if like Danny, you're planning your capital E event for later in the year, you can seed that by being the kind of person that reaches out to others in your foundation. Like, hey, how are you doing? Like, do you need anything? Are you feeling okay, overloaded, etc.? And then when you have your event, they know that it's okay to PM and be like, hey, do you need anything? Like, are you feeling okay? So, yeah.
Okay, so the last final question is, what does your organisation need right now? And that could be, do people need to join your organisation? Do they need to make sure they're signed up to vote for things? Do they need to donate? What is an action item for your organisation that people can do?
All those things. If there is a mechanism for voting, get involved in discussions around the voting. If there is a mechanism for fundraising, speak to your employer. If you have got an employer whose entire line of business depends upon the continuity of an open source project, whatever open source project it is, work out how to get money to that organisation in a way that can be used. And if you yourself have spare spoons to volunteer for, to be involved, step forward and let someone in the organisation know that you are available and would like to help if you can. Also, if you've got ideas, like just go, hey, I'm available, isn't as helpful as, hey, I'm interested in helping with the accounting. Do you need help in the accounting?
Subtle.
Yes, it really, yeah.
I know I'm going to get a rap over the knuckles from this. I think Linux Australia needs a council that is okay if nobody steps up to run a conference in a particular year, and it's okay not to dive in and run 80% of the conference yourself. It's okay for the conference not to run a year or two in a row. If it's a thing that the community wants, we'll have people stand up and run the conference. If we don't have people stand up and run, that's fine. It's not your job to plug all of the gaps all of the time.
And that is something that PyCon Australia has done in 2022. We had a fallow year where nothing happened and we came back stronger.
Yeah, 2023 was much better because of it. What does the PSF need? We want more people in the Python community doing things, but from my perspective, if you have a Python community related thing that doesn't need the PSF's input to make happen, go do that thing. Go out to your community. Go run the thing. You have our permission to make Python things happen in the world, and you don't have to come and ask us for permission. There's only 13 staff in the PSF, and they're very, very busy with a lot of things from people who are asking for permission to have the PSF do that thing. And we could do so much more in the community if only the things that we need to get involved in are the things that we get involved in.
Which is a kind of a microcosm of the whole open source thing generally. Like, the reason we have distributed version control is so you can distribute. The PSF, the DSF exist as legal instruments to hold a trademark. If you want to have your local meetup group or whatever use that logo, there are rules and conventions around what you can and can't do with that logo. If it's a little bit around the edge, ask. But past that point, you can set up your own organization to do that thing locally, and maybe it doesn't even need to be a formal organization. It's just 5 people sitting around doing a thing regularly that other people find useful. Don't feel constrained by the fact that there is the Python Foundation, to which all Python things must flow. This is not a large company. This is a group of volunteers who have to get together because of the legal instrument, not because that's how everything needs to be funneled through.
Yeah, in fact, some of my favorite things that have happened are things that I just heard about after they happened, like Python pizza. People eat pizza and talk about Python. No one asked me about that. No one asked if we were okay about pizza or did it have to be gluten-free vegan pizza, whatever. They just did it. Their community asked for whatever kind of pizza they wanted and they have it. The thing is, again, there are just 13 of us, not a coven, or magic, if you want to have a meetup in your town, do it. We can't be in every single place. To me, it's like my birthday every day when someone's like, oh, I started a Python meetup last year that you've never heard of. And I'm like, yes, that's amazing. I'm so glad. Let me know if you need help with something, but if not, then I will just take the present and be happy.
Happy birthday, Deb.
Thanks. Which one do you got? You can tell me later. We'll also take money. Is that a thunder crack of funding? Oh, okay.
think as Python New Zealand, as a registered charity, needs a committee, and a committee is made up of members. So I guess you would have to be a member if you wanted to be in the committee. But why would you want to be in the committee? I think this is all a grassroots effort, which starts as a numbers game, really, in my opinion. So we meet once a month in Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch, as I mentioned, meetup.com. So that's 3 times 12 is 36 presentations with maybe 30 people each. Is way more people and way more presentations than this conference, right? Yet this is the magnet and the big event once a year where people go away excited and want to start things or want to help with things. And that's a spark that needs to carry through until you're willing to do this, and somehow it's a group effort. And I don't know, what can you do? All of that, yes, all of that, maybe a little bit of that. The explosion of Python was faster than what we've been doing. There are people that use Python all the time. They don't know this conference exists, and they live in Wellington, believe it or not. True. More so around the country, and the meetups, all of this can grow, and I think just telling others that we exist is a good start. Yeah, thanks.
And with that, we're going to have to file out of this room and tell other people that we exist, because this is the end of our time. Thank you, everyone, for your questions.
Thank you,
Please thank my
Katie.
panelists.
Thank you, Katie.